Europe's time is over. It's been over for a while now, but this week made it clear their top leadership is in Beijing today. Normally, they would say China is hosting them, but that's not the right word. European leaders were effectively summoned to Beijing. For what? A summit between the EU and China. This meeting was supposed to happen in Brussels, that too back in the month of April, but Xi Jinping refused to go. So the European leaders had to visit Beijing instead. That's a typical Chinese power move, gain an upper hand even before the talks. I'm sure the Europeans were not thrilled because they cut short the trip. The talks were supposed to span 2 days, now it's a one-day affair. The EU leaders met Xi Jinping and Premier Li. They mainly talked about two issues, trade and Ukraine. The EU president said the relationship had reached an inflection point and that a rebalance was necessary.
We have reached an inflection point. Rebalancing our bilateral relations is essential because to be sustainable, the relations need to be mutually beneficial. We know that our trade relationship today needs more balance. Rebalancing is a necessity, and it is also in the interest of a stronger relationship between us.
What does she mean by rebalance? Well, look at these numbers. EU exports to China amount to $250 billion, $250 billion, EU to China. And EU imports from China, more than $600 billion. So the EU has a massive trade deficit with China. It's worth around $350 billion. And that's what Brussels wants to balance. China has long used state support to suppress prices. They offer billions in subsidies and tax cuts. As a result, Chinese goods are cheaper. They are artificially cheaper. Consider the example of Chinese EVs. European markets are flooded with them. Their homegrown EVs, European EVs, simply cannot keep up, which is why Brussels wants to rebalance. But will Xi Jinping agree? As expected, he gave no commitment.
Faced with accelerating global transformation not seen in a century, in a changing and turbulent world, Chinese and EU leaders should once again demonstrate vision and leadership and make the right strategic choices that will meet people's expectations and stand the scrutiny of history.
Again, classic China. Talk about vague choices and expectations, but offer no concessions. This leaves the EU in a bit of a pickle. They're facing tariff threats from Donald Trump. Other countries are striking deal after deal, but Brussels is not making ground. Yes, they are exploring agreements with India and Indonesia, but those are long-term fixes. They won't solve the looming tariffs from the US. On the other side, China's strategy is quite clear. They did not look for a deal. Instead, they took an aggressive approach. The Chinese slapped tariffs on American goods. They also curbed the supply of crucial rare earths, and it worked. The US came to the table for talks. They also resumed selling semiconductors to China. So Xi Jinping has a working plan to go on the offensive. But the EU does not have such a plan. They still need US support for most things. They need it for trade, for defense, and for fighting Russia. It's frankly looking a bit sad. In Beijing today, the EU president made a laughable attempt. He requested China's help to rein in Russia.
We discussed at length with President Xi our expectations for China to use its influence as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council to bring an end to Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine.
We say good luck with that. China is not even neutral in this war. They're supplying dual-use goods to Russia, and they won't be stopping that. So I guess the European mission was a failure. All they managed was this, a joint statement on climate change. That's all that they got. Having said that, the summit reaffirmed two things. One, there isn't a great deal of respect for Europe in Beijing. They're seen as America's lackey. And we've seen evidence of that before as well. In 2020, for example, European ambassadors wrote an op-ed for China's state media. In it, they mentioned that the Wuhan virus emerged in China. Guess what Beijing did? They censored that part out. What's worse, Europe agreed to it. They censored their own officials to suit China. So like I said, there is not much respect. Secondly, Europe is running out of options. If they wanted to jointly fight the tariffs, they're too late. They should have started a campaign earlier. China has struck a small deal. Japan has struck a deal. So have the UK and the Philippines. Meanwhile, Brussels is left out in the open. They have two options now: unleash countermeasures and trigger a brutal trade war, or bury their ego and look for a deal. It's certainly a rude wake-up call for Europe. Let's see how they recover from it.
Firstpost now available in 9 languages on YouTube. English,
Stands at $36 trillion.
French,
Le FMI, comme
German,
Geschäftsführenden Direktor,
Hindi,
$30 trillion ka karjo.
Indonesian,
Pemerintah tanpa pemeriksaan.
Italian,
Sekali radikali.
Japanese,
4 兆ドル以上も
Portuguese,
por causa do próprio balanço patrimonial.
Spanish.
Beautiful bill.
Go to Settings, click on Audio Track and select a language of your choice. Be the first to know what's happening around you in your first language. Firstpost.